When your trials come upon you, did you think to pause? How triggered are you feeling? Unpacking Mormonism is a subsidiary of Daisy Girl Communications, LLC. All content herein is intended for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice or counsel of your personal care provider. Our intent for today is to identify in yourself when you've been triggered. Like, how do I know that I'm being triggered in the moment or as close to the moment of those triggers occurring? And I feel like this was really timely for the simple fact, well, maybe it's not timely. Maybe we're a little bit late, but we are responding to some of the phenomenon that we've seen occur on social media recently in response to the most recent Mormon General Conference. So was it the first Sunday of April, or was it the last?
1st.
It was April Fool's Day and the last Saturday of March. Yeah, they just had General Conference. And for those of you who are with us that are not affiliated with the Mormon Church, twice a year, usually end of March, beginning of April, and then again, is it end of September, beginning of October?
It's always the first Sunday of April and October. So sometimes the Saturday is in the previous month.
Got it.
Usually it's April and October.
Okay, so April and October, they have their General Conference, which is when the top leadership of the church addresses the entire religion. They believe that they're addressing the entire world. I would say that very few people who are not Orthodox Mormons actually engage in listening to this sermon. I don't have any numbers to support that though. But they engage in this. And for those of us on the outside of that community, or even those of us that are in, but maybe more nuanced or struggling with things, General Conference can be really, really triggering because it's an opportunity to sit down and be like, holy hell, I can't believe I was ever a part of that. And I hear a lot of really culty things. I hear a lot of triggering things. You might even still hear some really inspiring things and everything in between, but it can be a really triggering time. And so our intent today is to be like, okay, how do I know when I'm being triggered if you don't already know? And then once you've identified, hey, I'm trigger, what can you do to kind of slow down your reactivity to those triggers so that your responses really begins to honor who you are, who you're trying to be. And so that way you're not kind of responding in a toxic way, just on the other side of the coin.
Exactly. Yeah. We want to be able to talk about how you stay true to yourself when things happen that kind of have a tendency to take us away from who we are because we become so anxious about them. And of course, this isn't specific to religion. Lots of triggers happen to us on a daily basis. So we're going to take things from the practice of religion, and hopefully that can also then be applied to our daily life and how we manage triggers that we can't avoid them.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's some triggers we certainly can avoid, but we can't avoid triggers in general. So let's learn how to recognize that we've been triggered, how to calm that process down, and then respond in a way that's authentic to who we are.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, Mason, one of the things that came up in our planning meeting as we talked about, hey, what are we going to do today, was that one of the things that we're witnessing is that those of us in the ex-smo community in that space, we're actually engaging in the same exact toxic behaviors that we're calling our, TBM Mormon counterparts out for. We're doing the same thing back at them, but we feel justified because we know it's not true. So they're doing it under the justification of this is the true church. And now we are doing the same thing back to them under the justification that, no, you're not the true church and we actually have the truth now. So therefore it makes it okay. And really at the end of the day, y'all, it's toxic as shit. So let's address the tendencies and the patterns and kind of, I hate to say it, but like be the bigger person. It's not about being the bigger person. It's more about being more emotionally aware, and maybe even more evolved. Let's move past these toxic behavioral patterns and into something healthier that also brings us more joy. Like, let's protect our joy and not engage in this bullshit.
I think for me, that's really what it's about, whether or not, when I think of the word toxic, I think of poison. And it is very hard for me to live in a healthy way if I'm constantly allowing poison into my life. Again, sometimes you can't avoid it, but a lot of times we can. And if we learn to recognize that that's what's going on, we can step back, call it being the bigger person if you want. But for me, it's really about being a healthy person, and not even a healthier person, just being a healthy person. I want to be healthy in my life. How do I manage these triggers? How do I make comments in such a way that it still allows me to have a voice, but doesn't bring extra toxicity into my life? And sometimes I do a good job of that, and sometimes I don't do a very good job of that.
Right, absolutely.
So I'm that's why we're here, is to learn how to manage these in a way that is healthy and authentic to us.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you brought up the poison analogy. I love that you utilized that, because number one, it gave me a squirrel moment to the dentist, I believe in Utah, that poisoned his wife.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like total squirrel. Was reading again in my social media time, which I think I'm spending too much time on social media in a non-productive way. But apparently he was also the bishop at the time who poisoned his wife. That might be something that our listeners want to talk about. So squirrel, hopefully that's a productive squirrel, and we'll come back to it. But also, if you think about it, if I'm ingesting or utilizing some sort of poison, I don't feel good.
Right.
And so at its very basic, what we're going to be doing is talking about digging into our physiology a little bit. When we engage in this type of toxicity, we don't feel good. We might feel justified. We might feel revenge. We might feel, kind of like that. I want to say, like, what's one way that Sarah knows that she's triggered and responding in her, survival brain, that amygdala, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response? What is one thing that Sarah knows, or one of my tells that I'm in that triggered space, is when I type out a response, and when I hit send, I'm like, ha, yeah. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, take that. Yeah, I'm responding from my survival mechanisms. I've been triggered. Is this what I want to do? Is this how I want to present myself? And how does that make me feel? Yeah, that take that might feel good temporarily, kind of like a drug. I might feel good for a little bit, but in the end, did it serve my purpose? Did it help me be who I want to be? What was the productivity of that? And then I really get to kind of dig in and be curious about myself.
Yeah, that's it's something that might actually be a little bit triggering. So here it comes. But we're going to talk a little bit about Elder Holland later, and something that he said came to mind. And I don't think I'm going to quote this exactly right, but the thought that I want to share is that he said something along the lines, everyone can have what they want, or they can have, I think he said, what God wants for them. But I would say you can either have what you want, or you can have what you want more. And sometimes it's about recognizing, right now, what I want is for you to feel the same pain I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. But what I really want maybe isn't that. And so it's about just kind of judging, am I in the place where I'm going to say what I really want to say? Or am I in the place where I'm going to express my pain in a way that isn't really the way I want to do it? It's just how I want to do it right now. Okay, so hurt me, I want to hurt you back. Yeah.
So I want to check in with you just to make sure I understood. So what I hear you saying is you're taking this quote from Jeffrey R. Holland, even if it's triggering, and you're saying, hey, there's some validity in this of, is what I'm doing going to get me what I want right now? Or is what I'm doing going to get me what I want in the long term, and how those are connected?
Yes.
Okay. So meaning, just because it makes me feel good right now may not meet my long-term goals.
Yes. And
how to make that mesh up a little bit better.
Yeah. An example being that, I've had a conversation with one of my close family members recently again. And I thought I was kind of getting somewhere in that conversation. For a while, it felt that way. And then at the end, the final comment that I'm not even sure I've actually read it yet, because the very first thing
Right, you
that
got
was
just
said,
the first lines on the text message.
the very first thing that was said demonstrated to me that I'm not making progress in this. And so if my end goal is that I want to be able to maintain a healthy relationship with this person, I have to be able to check myself and say, I'm not going to respond the way that I want to respond right now, right, because that doesn't help me gain my eventual goal. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, is being able to slow down, pause, and you're going to walk us through the steps of this, but to be able to just take that step back and go, hold on a second. Right. What do I actually want from this situation? And usually that's probably enough for us to go, well, that's not what I want. Maybe I'm not sure what I want, but that's not it. So let me just shut up for a minute, or let me think about, or whatever.
Well, and I love that. And so listeners, if you want some more information on this story that Mason's talking about this interaction, we're actually going to be talking about that either next week or in the next couple of weeks here, where it's brother number one is at it again, and some of the things that have come from that, but really talk about how you can do that, how you can go, okay, what's my long-term goal here? So stay tuned, because we're actually going to be dissecting that story even more in an upcoming episode. Yay, Mason, your family gives us so much content, right?
Well, and hopefully the eventual outcome is that we manage those relationships better and in a healthier way for us. So that's really the only reason that we bring them up, is so that we can learn from them and learn how to manage things in a better way.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what are we seeing on social media. Like, let's dig in, and what are we talking about? So I'm going to kind of take charge, because this episode today was came from some of the things that I was observing and thinking about over the last week. And so the first one that really came to mind for me was actually in a different Facebook group that I'm a part of with atheists. And, I'm still kind of on the fence about what that looks like. I'm going to say I'm more agnostic right now than atheist, because I'm still working on that. And one of the things that I saw was, somebody who identifies as atheist feeling really awkward and identifying, hey, I live in the southern part of the country, so I'm right in the middle of the Bible Belt. And I was invited to pray in the workplace. Like, we all kind of got together and we did this like little prayer. And that's very much a cultural norm in their workplace, but it really makes them feel awkward. And the reason that I felt like this was a good one to bring up today is to kind of reiterate that point, Mason, that this is not just a Mormon thing. This is an all encompassing,
right, not even just
issue.
A religious thing. It's a daily life thing that we deal with.
Right. And that oftentimes, I know that here in the United States, we're supposed to be kind of a country that was founded on Christian principles, but there's also kind of this, we're not really supposed to mix religion into our workplace, but how that actually translates in real life is really difficult. I mean, I know
right.
that when I lived in, northeastern Arizona growing up, that most workplaces there were heavily influenced by Mormon culture, because there was a high population of Mormons in the area. And so for those that didn't fit into that paradigm, I'm sure there were things that I was never able to identify while living in Snowflake as being awkward at all, because it was my norm. But for people on the outside, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable. And so, yeah, there's going to be triggers. And, I kind of related to this because we've spent a great deal of time in the Bible Belt in the South as part of your military career. And I've seen some pretty wonky things happen in environments that, I would be like, this is kind of interesting to see this in the United States. And so, yeah, I kind of resonate with this individual that identifies as atheist. Like, we're talking about a work project that is, scientific, or this is not a religious thing at all. And yet here we are praying about our performance, and that a lot of people in our country would value that as, yes, this is, we're a country of Christians, this is a good thing, but also, hey, this doesn't necessarily resonate for everybody. And are we inadvertently excluding certain people because of what we profess to be an amazing thing in the culture, which is freedom of religion, which also means freedom from practicing religion in the United States? How is that actually playing out in our day-to-day environment?
Have you heard about the 2018 study that showed half of prenatal vitamins tested had unacceptable levels of heavy metals? No? Well, now you have. I'm Kat, mother of 3 and founder of Ritual, the company making traceability the new standard in the supplement industry. I remember staring at my prenatal vitamins and finding all these things I was trying to avoid: high amounts of heavy metals, synthetic colorants, and unnecessary ingredients. So, at 4 months pregnant, I quit my job and started Ritual because I believe that all women deserve to know what they're putting in their bodies and why. I'm so proud of our prenatal vitamin. The ingredients are 100% traceable, it's third-party tested for microbes and heavy metals, and recently received the Purity Award from the Clean Label Project. You see, we trace like a mother because, let's be honest, no one cares quite like a mother. But don't just take my word for it. Trace for yourself with 25% off at ritual.com/prenatal.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I struggle with and that I've noticed in this kind of context is that when you're coming from a place of quote unquote truth, you spend a lot less time thinking about how people will respond, because God is real and we're supposed to pray to him.
Right.
We don't
Wait,
really
hang on,
consider.
pause. Mason just did God is real with air quotes,
Right, air
y'all.
quotes,
You didn't
yeah.
see the air quotes. God is real. So, Mason, you might need to start saying squirrel. You might need to say
Quote unquote,
right.
God is real.
Quote unquote, air quotes. Go ahead.
Because quote unquote, God is real and we're quote unquote supposed to pray to him. We don't really think about the fact that we might be causing some uncomfort or discomfort for the people around us because we're coming from a place of quote unquote truth. And of course, you and I have seen that a lot in Mormonism. Other people have probably seen that in religion or whatever. Or if you're in the place of power, you're the CEO of a company or something. If you're in the place of power, maybe you don't always consider how your actions are affecting other people because they don't affect you, or no one's going to tell you because you're in that place of authority. And so it becomes important for us to be able to just step back again and go, well, how is this responding? How is this affecting the people around me as well?
Well, see, and I love that. I love all the air quotes and everything going on here, because what you're really talking about is subjective truth versus objective truth.
Yes.
And so when I perceive that what I'm doing is from a foundation of absolute truth, much like religions do, I believe there is a God. There's no way I can objectively prove that as factual truth.
But I know it in my heart.
Right. But and it's not a knowing, it's a believing. But as religion, we have a really hard time recognizing that your knowledge isn't objective, factual knowledge. It is a subjective experience. You're basing it on experiential data. Therefore, it is subjective. You think it's true. You believe it's true. But because you believe it so much, you cross that boundary into God as an objective truth. Therefore, I'm justified in doing whatever the hell I want to because this is, again, air quotes, quote unquote, true.
Right.
And you cannot prove that God exists. And so there's got to be, if you want to be in this healthy relationship functioning space, you need to know your audience. If I know that I'm in a workplace and there is representation from atheism, Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, Mormonism, whatever, how do we honor all of the subjective belief patterns, how can we honor that and come together and have a cohesive team? And one of the things that happens, and I know that I'm going to get, my right-wing people, my strong Christianities, my strong Mormons going, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're taking God out of this. I don't look at it that way. I would say if there is a God, if I am making space so that however you connect with a higher power or don't connect with a higher power is honored within this shared space, I'm actually increasing the love of that higher power that I actually believe in. My subjective truth, I'm accentuating that. And one of the ways that I think the schools have done that really well is giving people a moment of silence. When we took religion out of the schools, we replaced it with a moment of silence so that those people who want to pray can do so silently in their mind. Those who want to meditate for a moment can in their mind. Those who want to do nothing with that time space, totally check out for a minute and you're all good. And so it could be, let's take a moment of silence. Like when I look at this atheist that's really uncomfortable because we're now praying in a very Christian manner and therefore excluding members of the team, or even having members of the team be like, well, this is kind of ridiculous. You're taking all of my hard work and giving that credit to somebody else. And that, I feel that dishonors me as a human being. Well, we can really dig into that and say, hey, let's do a moment of reflection before we move forward on this project. Like, let's take just a moment of silence so that we can all reflect, express gratitude, do whatever that we feel is the best way to do this silently by ourselves while we stand in a circle. Great, and move on. And what you end up doing is, if we look at the Jesus of the Bible, it was, I kind of take the Jesus of the Bible, whether he's mythical, historical, or the actual savior of the world, the way that Christians believe that he was. I kind of take him and I look at him and it's like, if you're doing things that bring people closer to love, unconditional love, that's of me. And if you're not, that's not of me, and leave it at that. And so a moment of silence that honors, all of these religious or cultural practices to occur at the same time simultaneously, which inevitably from, now my scientific and mental health places, it connects us as a team and kind of sets our goal and intention in the way that best represents our individual personal beliefs. Well, I think that increases love, honor, and respect, and you actually have a more spiritual, positive outcome.
Absolutely.
Sarah's personal opinion. All right, let me step off my soapbox. All right, so then the second one, Mace, I'm sorry, before I move on, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. I think that was described very well.
Okay, and I got constructive criticism that sometimes I talk too fast, so let me slow down my speech here, get going, and I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. So squirrel. Okay, so the second one that I want to bring up was, Mason, you and I were actually on a cruise ship or coming back from our cruise. Oh no, we remodeled the bathroom on General Conference Sunday. So Mason and I recently went to Mexico to celebrate our combined birthdays. The end of March, beginning of April, and our little boys were super, super sweet and flooded their bathroom while we were gone. So the day we got back from our cruise, we had to clean up water damage and bleach stuff to, prevent mold growth and replace a vanity. And
fun times.
Right. The ox was in the mire for us. Trigger warning, ox the mire, for General Conference Sunday. But I've actually thought it was funny. The last couple of General Conferences, I've been on a cruise ship. I didn't mean to do it that way, but maybe maybe there's like some Freud going on in there, right? But anyway, one of the things that was interesting is while we were on our cruise, we got the data package on the cruise ship so that we could communicate with our kiddos through social media apps like Snapchat and Facebook Messenger and whatnot. And so we posted some pictures of our cruise while we were floating on the ocean. And one of the things that I saw in my social media feed were a lot of people talking about how triggering general conferences for them.
Right.
And I think that space really needs to be honored. And I actually had a friend that did like the come and listen to God speak through his prophets in general conference. And I got that like almost tightness in my stomach and a little bit nauseous, like, people are going to go and sit in front of their TVs for 6 to 12 hours or something like that in a trance to listen to the indoctrination. Because for me, that's what it looks like. It's
right.
difficult to engage with. Like they're kind of boring talks. You have to stay mentally like, you have to focus. You kind of get into this trance-like state. And then you start to pick up this, hypnotic messaging. And I recognize that as being kind of an unhealthy thing. And it's somewhat required. Like you're strongly encouraged.
Oh, yeah.
If you're Orthodox in that religion. And if you're missing it, they want you to listen to it later or read it. Like this is the modern day revelation, blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, for me, that's triggering. And I think we need to kind of do a shout out and say, hey, it's normal that this is triggering and that's okay. Your body is responding to your brain and body are responding to the fact that you are being alerted to something that you now identify as unhealthy, unsafe, and somewhat toxic. So when you're getting invited to join in on something that you feel is not healthy, your amygdala is supposed to get activated. That's okay. And a little bit later, we're going to talk about what to do about that.
Yeah, I think there's numerous reasons that we could mention why General Conference would be triggering for people. Identifying what those reasons are for everybody is not our goal here, but recognizing that there are reasons to be triggered and that that's normal and okay is the goal. And so once we go through this process, it's going to be left to you as the listener to figure out what exactly is triggering about General Conference. What is it? Am I still really close to having been a member of the church? Am I still a member but on my way out? Do I have family members that are still members? And oh my gosh, one of them is going to address me again because somebody said something in General Conference about reaching out to the people that have left or, whatever right. might be there.
Right. It's
the
like,
triggers are real.
Right. It's like, oh my gosh, it's General Conference. That means they're going to talk about something about rescuing those who have gone astray. And now the missionaries are going to show up at my house.
Right.
So I got a whole week of people calling me when I really don't. I was enjoying my silence. Right. There's a lot of reasons. It's also really sticky because those who are Orthodox do not necessarily identify. Mason, this goes back to what you said before, because I think it's true.
Right.
I don't think most of them recognize just how triggering that is.
I would imagine not.
But we also really need to honor their freedom to say what they want to say because, again, in the United States of America, and I also think just humans in general, we want our voice heard. We want it acknowledged. And so if I'm on the inside of that system and I'm truly excited and I find great value in this, it makes sense that I'm going to invite others to join me. And so this is one of those, I'm being triggered, but it's also not my place or appropriate to say that triggers me. You need to shut up because that's not healthy or appropriate either. But I know I want to, like, I had to fight the urge on a couple of those invitations to be like, yes, please join all the Mormons for 12 hours of deep indoctrination and trance-like ritualism. Like, that's what I wanted to say. And you know what? Inside my head, I had to watch that physiological thing of, I type that out, gotcha. And I'm like, ooh, you're triggering. That's probably not healthy or productive.
Yeah. Well, because we also recognize that for some people, General Conference is very uplifting still. It's very it's a very spiritual experience for them. And we don't want to take that away from anybody.
Well, some of us do.
Well, maybe so. But
is fine.
I meant you and me in unpacking Mormonism. That is not our goal. And one of the things you said, too, is that recognizing that the people that are reaching out to you have no idea that they're being triggering can also be helpful. It kind of going back to, we talked several weeks ago about reading the room and just kind of recognizing that if they're coming to you like this and you recognize they're not trying to be triggering, that will probably help your conversation and help your response to it.
Right. Their intent is not to upset me.
Right.
Even though that is what's happening.
Even though it does, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we've all been there where we get upset on accident or we get upset on purpose. There's a difference there and recognizing it. Right. When someone comes trying to upset me, I'm going to respond differently than someone that upset me but didn't even know that they did it. So,
well, and I think, too, it's important to keep in mind that when we get triggered, it's normal for our survival brain to want to shut up and silence the thing or the person that triggered us. Like, you know, when we evaluate here in the next couple of weeks what that person who's really close to you and those text message exchanges have been, you're identifying over and over, you're trying to shut me up. You just want me to stop talking. That's normal, because if you know, you're sharing some of the things you've learned about the sticky history of the church, you start talking about it, it's normal for those still inside to be like, that's not true. You need to be quiet. That's that's bad. They can't handle the, you know, objective truth of their history. Right. Because they've been taught from the time they were itty bitty, number one, you're not supposed to look at it. Number two, you ignore the bad. You just look at the good, you know, these types of things. And so, of course, what we would consider factual information, I would say that the icky historical stuff, most of it, at least most of what I really focus on, is objectively factual because we have physical, tangible data that can be traced back as, you know, being authenticated, blah, 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 blah. Like when we talk about the scientific process, that a great deal of that is objectively factual. You're going to find that those inside that system won't look at that objectively factual information because it's triggering. And the natural brain tendency is to shut it up, shut it down.
Chicken tacos should only be trusted to chicken professionals.
That's where we come in. Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One comes with pico de gallo and creamy chipotle ranch. And the other comes with bacon, lettuce, tomato, and avocado ranch. Chicken experts since 1990. Chicken taco experts since now. Order yours today in the Zax Rewards app. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
And so it's normal for us to want to silence all of these people who are inviting us or make fun of the stupid shit that's said in there and
Triggers
exaggerate the severity of what's being said because that's a normal survival response. Hey, that's your survival brain, your amygdala, your 4F systems, whatever you want to call it. That's Sarah's Gertrude firing up. I named my amygdala Gertrude for those of you who have not been listening from the very beginning. Right. The name of my survival brain is Gertrude Petunia Westbrook. So when Gertrude acts out, it's normal for me to want to discredit that or silence it in a way that is very quick because my brain wants the solution immediately. It's like, nope, shut that up. Get me back to my status quo. Our brain does not like being in uncomfortable spaces.
No.
So that's normal. What can I do to slow that down and respond in a way that is respectful and honors who I'm striving to be?
Well, and you just identified that triggers go both ways, right? We're talking about us being triggered by things like General Conference, but recognize that people who are still active in those high demand religions, they get triggered by this information too because it threatens the way that they see things.
Right.
And it makes sense that that's painful. Most of us have been in that situation. So it would be helpful for us to remember how painful that was so that we can honor that others might feel that pain or are trying to avoid that pain as well.
And I really love that you said, Mason, that this goes both ways, because our next two examples, we're going to really see that. Like the next two examples that I've got, we're going to see that how we in the ex-Mormon, post-Mormon, whatever space you want to call this, those who are outside of the religious organization, the way that we respond is absolutely going to be triggering for the people in it.
Right.
And the fact that we're stuck in this cycle of I trigger you, you trigger me, I trigger you, you trigger me, what we're doing is we're creating this backfire effect where neither side is being heard, valued, understood, honored, respected. Like this is where we are giving back to them what they're giving us. And I don't care which side you're on saying we're giving back to them. If you're on the inside, we're giving back to the ex-Mo community what they're giving us, or we're on the ex-Mo community giving the Mormons back what they give us. It's the same. Like it doesn't matter which side of this you're on, this cyclical triggering, whether it's intentional or not, is really harmful.
Right. It's toxic.
Yeah. So my next example is apparently Jeffrey R. Holland, who used to be my favorite, y'all. I used to devour his talks, and it took a long time for me to go, ooh, that's a lot of sugar with a little shit in there. And now when I listen to it, I was like, man, that's a lot of shit. And I don't see the sugar or the sweetness anymore. And I'm going to acknowledge that. But apparently he was excused from General Conference. He's been given, according to the church's website, he's been given 8 weeks of leave from his duties as a general authority. And the reasoning that we are being given is he and his wife are recovering from the effects of COVID, and he's undergoing dialysis, which makes me think that he's struggling with kidney failure. I don't know any other reason why you would get dialysis if you don't have some semblance of kidney disease and kidney failure.
Right. You do dialysis for kidney failure. It's probably related to COVID. That happens to some people when they get really sick from it. So,
okay.
But yes, it is kidney failure.
So he's a really, really sick dude. And one of the things that I saw that really prompted today's podcast is I'm seeing people in the Exmo space who I consider emotionally mature, intelligent, really good people, almost celebrating that somebody is significantly ill and struggling right now. And the justification is he said some shitty shit. And he called out for theoretical musket fire against the homosexual population. And I think that when I'm seeing people make fun of him. I've seen pictures of the underside of his chin being compared to a scrotum ball sack with the jiggly jowls on either side. So we are body shaming this man. He is 86 years old. And so, yes, it makes sense that his, face looks different than it did when he was 20. So we're body shaming and making fun of his physical characteristics. We are yay, at least he can't say something else at Southern Utah University, one of those schools where there was some petitions to don't let him speak because of what he does. That's not what we stand for. And while I can resonate with the relief that he won't be given an opportunity to really harm more of our LGBT brothers and sisters at that college, I am going to be honest, I'm grateful and relieved that he will not be giving the commencement address at that college, because I think that he inadvertently or vertently, on purpose, I don't know, maybe he's doing it on purpose, but he's harming people in a lot of what he says. I hear what you're saying, but on the flip side, my triggers and my responses, I don't want to be the person that makes fun of or laughs at the way his body has aged. That's not okay. I don't want people making fun of me because I have a little pooch of my belly, of my lower abdomen, because frankly, I've had 3 babies and I eat too much chocolate and I'm getting older. You know, that's a normal part of our life cycle. And yet it's okay to make fun of him because he said shitty shit. Or to celebrate the fact that he's dying.
Right.
I mean, that's just not who I want to be. And yet I'm seeing this as being acceptable, laughed at, and hundreds of thousands of comments against this man. I think there's a healthier way to honor this. Like, I don't want to silence these voices. I want you to be able to say things like, you know, while I'm really sad that he is struggling, I would not wish kidney failure on my worst enemy. I am also glad that he's not going to be put in a position of authority at a college where he can really harm my LGBT brothers and sisters. We can have both opinions and not be hateful.
Yeah.
And I think that most of the people who are making fun of this man would not feel like that was okay in most other statements. Like, if you wouldn't say it to a first grader, then maybe it shouldn't be said. And I'm using the word should here. This is a legalism moment. Maybe it shouldn't be said about this old man. If you wouldn't want it said about your grandpa, just because this guy has said some really awful things, just because he's lied, yes, I hear what you're saying, he's done some shitty shit, that does not mean that it's healthy to respond in equally toxic ways.
Really, that's what we're talking about, is how do we get to the point where we can manage our triggers in such a way that we remain healthy. And lashing out at someone, even someone who has hurt other people, isn't usually healthy. I'm not going to say it's not ever, because sometimes maybe that's what somebody needs, but not usually. Usually it's not healthy or helpful to us to lash out at someone. And so we just need to be able to, again, manage the triggers in such a way that we can respond in a way, I feel like I've said this 3 or 4 times now, respond in a way that's authentic to who we are. If that's authentically who you are, okay, fine. Maybe you need to step back and figure out if that's authentically who you want to be. But ultimately, it's us responding. We want to train ourselves to respond in a way that is the way we want to respond. Not just now, but tomorrow and a week from now and 2 weeks from now. So we're not looking back and going, shoot, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm okay with the repetition because that's how our brains learn best. We're indoctrinating you all with our repetition. Oh my goodness.
Repetition.
There it is.
It's the key to adult learning. My professor said that all the time. The key to adult learning is repetition, repetition, repetition.
Yeah. It's actually the key to learning in general. Like, even when you're little, repetition. I mean, how many times have we told the kids to put their shoes away? How many times have you told your wife to put her shoes away? You know what? Let's get back to the topic here at
Next
hand.
example.
Yeah. So then, well, and I want to reiterate before we move on to the next example is that I 100% believe and agree with advocating against some of the shitty shit that Holland has done and said. I believe in that. But we need to do it from a place where our comments and our actions have healthy purpose and lead to positive social change.
Yeah, and I will go back to our very first episode, and we've tried to say this a few times along the way, but our very first episode, we said that our goal at Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma was to not attack character. We wanted to bring to light some seriously icky stuff, but we did not want to do it in such a way that we're attacking someone's character. And so same thing with this situation. We can talk about the icky stuff
right, let's
from
talk
Holland
about the
or anybody else.
Icky actions, icky statements.
Without talking about him or cutting him down as a person, we can talk about the bad things without maligning someone.
Yeah, well, and one of the reasons is because when we cut at somebody's character, we've made an unequal, non-healthy playing ground that affects change. You know, we learned this in the Gottman curriculum, that if I come into an argument with Mason, you're the biggest jerk on the planet, how stupid can you be? It don't matter what comes after that. It's not going to have long-lasting positive change in our relationship and our marriage, and it's definitely not going to help us connect and be happy as individuals. We will find that as we respond with shame, like when we are making fun and body shaming Jeffrey R. Holland, we are hurting a lot more than just Jeffrey R. Holland. Frankly, you're hurting yourself, because as your body begins to change and you look in the mirror after you've done these types of things, you're going to be struggling with accepting who you are, who your grandpa, your brother, your sister, your kid, when their body isn't perfect. Like, we are hurting more than just Holland. And we've perpetuated this shame. And as Brene Brown says, we worship Brene Brown here. As Brene Brown says, there's no growth. There's no way to change and have personal development and growth in the shame zone.
Right.
So we've got to stay away from those character attacks and that dehumanizing of somebody because we disagree and or are disgusted with some of the things that they've done.
Yeah. In that statement, you know, Mason, you're the worst person ever. Either you've triggered me into a fight response where I'm not going to be open to listening to what you have to say, or you've shamed me into a kind of a corner, or even shamed me into submission, where whatever I end up agreeing to, I'm not in the right place to really accept it anyway. So
right.
You haven't won anything. You've only lost.
You've perpetuated the dysfunction.
Yeah, you've only lost. That argument, whatever time we spend in that argument, is not going to be helpful or fruitful time.
Absolutely. And I want to just correct, Mason, your science. You said we're going to I'm going to get you into a defensive response or shame you into silence or something. Response. I want to scientifically adjust that from a neurobiology standpoint. It's that I have either triggered you into a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, or shamed you into a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. Some people respond to being shamed with fight, others with flight, others with freeze, others with fawn.
Makes sense.
There's so many pieces there, but yes, either way, that defensiveness, that accusation, that shame, we're triggering the survival mechanism. And when that survival brain comes on, your logical, rational, creative problem solving, growth, learning brain is impaired.
Yeah, I love that explanation, because I think I was coming from a personal place that either I would get triggered into fight or shamed into silence, basically.
Right.
And I recognize that's not how everybody would respond. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right. The last one is the dude. Mason, why don't you quote this guy? Because I didn't look it up. I have no idea who this general authority is.
So he's one of the 70. I'd never heard of him either, so I don't know. But anyway, this has been all over Facebook too. This is Elder Alan D. Haney. This is from April 2023 LDS General Conference, and he says, unlike vintage comic books and classic cars, prophetic teachings do not become more valuable with age. That is why we should not seek to use the words of past prophets to dismiss the teachings of living prophets.
You know, y'all, I'm triggered with you. Because it really sounds like everything that past prophets have said is now obsolete, and maybe they're not prophets, which I don't believe that they, when it comes to the Mormons prophets, I don't believe that they were, me, Sarah, personally. But it kind of sounds like he's devaluing everything, but that's not his intent. And so what I've seen is an exaggeration, a taking this statement way out of context and adding to it and growing it to the point where for those on the inside, it's lost its value, because that's not what Mr. Haney was actually saying. And Mason, when you and I were early married, and I was really struggling with exaggeration. So for those, again, who haven't been with us since we started this, One of the things that I struggled with growing up was that my voice was not heard as a child unless I was telling a whopper of a story. And that translated for me into my, late teens and early 20s of, a lot of people would say pathological lying, and I wouldn't call it pathological lying. I just grew the truth into something that it wasn't. So I was telling tall tales because I desperately needed to be heard, valued, and understood. And once, Mason, you were like, hey, when you exaggerate like that, I stop listening, you've lost your point. And I started to get the opposite of when you exaggerate, nobody listens to you. And then with therapy, I learned how to just be honest. And that if people heard me or not, I got in a much better, healthier place with that.
Right.
Well, I see that same dynamic happening here. Is what elder brother, Mr. Haney, whatever you want to call him, said, is it triggering? Yes. Is it problematic? Hell yes. This is a problematic thing. Is it contradictory to past teachings? Yes. Yes, 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 and yes, it's a problem. However, we've taken what he's said and we've blown it into something that it's not. We're no longer in a reality-based place, and it's losing its meaning. It's losing its purpose. It's become sensational. It's become satire. But what we're doing in our place of being triggered is we're purporting that this satire meme, this satire whatever, and we're saying this is fact. And it's not fact. And that's what the Mormons are doing to us. It's gaslighting. And it's unhealthy. And we need to tone it back. We need to find that middle space where we can advocate for actual truth without exaggerating it and taking it out of its context and what he meant. The way when I went back and listened to this statement, again, I didn't even remember the guy's name, y'all. But when I went back and listened to this in context, the way that I took it was, we take the past prophets and what they've taught, and we've grown into where we are today. And the current day prophet, we can't take what the past prophets have said and have that trump the current prophet because times have changed, and that's what modern day revelation is for. Yes, I still see the problem because what we're doing is the ex-Mormon population and the current membership, they're being gaslit into don't take these really icky things that past prophets have said and done and have that trump what's going on right now. It's that let's just ignore this icky and move forward without addressing the really toxic shit from our past. Like I hear that in this statement. But he's not saying that everything that past prophets have said is useless. I mean,
right.
It exists.
Right.
We've got to advocate for change, but not by making what he said satirical.
Yeah. Well, and you can make it satirical, but that doesn't translate into a fact. Then you can't take what he said, satirize it, and then make your satire fact. That doesn't really work that way. But I agree with you. The icky part of that is that it is basically an excuse to not talk about some of the things that are going. For me, what it feels like he meant was if George Washington talked about problems with transportation in America, well, some of what he had to say would probably still be relevant, but most of it wouldn't. Right. You'd have to, because everything about transportation has changed. Nothing that he used for transportation is actively used for transportation now, except for walking. Nothing. And so his words would essentially be invalid because of everything that's changed. And I think that's kind of what he's saying there, is that things that Joseph Smith or Brigham Young talked about aren't going to be valid anymore because our world has changed. The problem is, as you explained, you've opened it up to the fact that, well, now it's almost like they're saying, let's not talk about polygamy anymore because Wilford Woodruff said we don't do that anymore. well,
right. Let's not talk about the racism issues because we fixed that.
Because we fixed
let's
it. Yeah.
not talk about And I think the other thing here, let's not talk about that. Yeah, that was a complete and intelligible sentence. Thank you very much.
Well, it doesn't matter. Let's not talk about the fact that Joseph Smith married 14-year-old girls. It doesn't matter anymore because we don't do that anymore as a church, but it does still matter.
Well, and I think too, there's the danger of it opens things up for we're changing the doctrine and we're gaslighting those to say, well, that's not how it really went, or that's not really what it was. You know, our current prophet says that was a little misguided, but the problem is that the foundational doctrine is that these prophets speak for God, and God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Right. And as Bill Reel and RFM have pointed out, very few, if any, doctrine of the Mormon Church has actually stayed the same past, present, and future. I would say that, you know, some of the ones that I've identified that are the same is that baptism is essential for salvation. Now, all the things surrounding baptism, that's all gotten a little bit, you know, adjusted here, adjusted there. And so, yes, again, the statement is problematic. It's gaslighting. It minimizes and silences people who are bringing up concerns.
Ultimately, it's triggering.
It is very triggering. But when we grow that to mean something that it doesn't, when we exaggerate that, we create a toxic environment, and we also contribute to the backfire effect, meaning that those people who are watching us are going, that's not what he meant. I don't want to be a part of that either. And we end up excluding people in pain who are really struggling, honestly, with this type of contradictory bullshit that's going on in the church. And there's a lot of it. Again, I'm not excusing the problem of what he said. Just like with Holland, I'm not excusing the shit he said. But we've got to identify that the way we're responding to our triggers isn't productive in getting the change that we are seeking.
Yeah. There was one clarification I wanted to make too when we talk about exaggeration, because I think this is an important piece to that. When you exaggerate and it's not obvious that you're exaggerating, that's when I feel like you lose your point, because now I don't know what I can trust. I can't trust what you said because it wasn't accurate. Whereas satire, on the other hand, is kind of that exaggerating, and we know that you're exaggerating. We're exaggerating it to bring extra emphasis to the ridiculousness of it.
Right.
But
that's
everybody
the beauty
knows,
of satire.
But everybody knows that you've exaggerated it. Oh, they've exaggerated it to try and make this point. Okay, I get it. And so that's kind of the issue there, is that if we as this community take this statement or any statement and exaggerate it just a little bit to the point that it's not really what it was, but everybody doesn't know that, that's when we lose credibility. Because now essentially you're lying about what was said, and that's going to cause people to listen even less, because we all know people like this. A lot of us are like this. You might say 100 truths, but 2 lies, and someone's going to latch onto those. Your dad is like that, right? They latch right onto those 2 lies, and you've lost everything else because you made those lies. And so that's the danger in the exaggeration, is that we don't want to lose credibility, because then we lose the ability to actually influence or change behavior.
Right. Well, and I love that you talk about losing credibility, because one of the things that I've learned I have to do in the Exmo space is when I see these types of memes come up and these things come up and they're, being, put forth as factual.
Yep.
I've learned that I got to go all the way back into the data and review it in order to see Is it actually factual? I'm learning that I can't trust a lot of this stuff in the ex-Mormon space because it's a misrepresentation. Is it problematic? Yep. Yes, but to what degree and to what intent? And so, yeah, Mason, if it's satire, and everybody knows it's satire, or the majority of people know it's satire, right, because some people just miss satire altogether.
It's fairly obvious that it's satire.
But if your intent is to, subject it, what is the word I'm looking for? Present it. There it is. Present it as satire. Fine. But when you're presenting it as fact, you lose credibility because it isn't fact. And I'm talking about objective fact that you can take from tangible evidence. Like if I go back and listen to that or read that,
the statement is right there to verify.
The statement is there, and the spirit of which it was stated, the intent, and taking that statement in context, because Orthodox Mormons are really, really good at taking a scripture out of context, assigning a whole new meaning around it, and spitting it back out as this is what the scriptures mean by this. And right. I mean, as I've left that organization, it's one of the reasons I was like, yeah, it does say that in the Bible, but that's not what they meant. You got to put that back into context. That's what we're doing in the ex-Mo community, is that we're taking these statements out of context, switching it up a little bit and spitting it back out as this is the reality that you're in. It's a subtle form of gaslighting. You will lose credibility, and you end up isolating people that are truly in struggle, that are trying to navigate something that was very problematic.
Yeah, and in context of today's situation, today's conversation, when you then face that, it's even more difficult to identify if you were triggered, why you were triggered, and then move forward.
Right.
Because
it's paralyzing.
Because everything's been skewed. Whereas
right.
if you can go to the data and say, okay, that's what they said. Yeah, okay, I am still triggered, but now I understand why I'm triggered. Because in order to work through it, you kind of have to know why. Why is this triggering me? Because then I can move forward to, okay, what do I do with this?
Right. Well, and the other piece that I want to add as we get into how are we going to identify that we're triggered is that, once again, this exaggeration or this adding extra intensity to what was said or what was done is normal when you're triggered. Okay? Like when I see a snake, my amygdala is going to make that snake, that 3-foot snake, look like it was 5 feet long and an extra inch in, diameter around, because that's what my survival brain does. And so one of the things that you really need to do is identify what are your personal tells. How do you know that you specifically have been triggered? So Mason, earlier you said, I get defensive into argument or I get shamed into silence. And that's Mason's personal survival mechanisms.
Right.
For me, I get kind of spiteful. I get a little bit petty. And so again, it's that, I got you. Like, I don't even care how my words affect you for the rest of your life.
Right.
You deserved that. When I am in that space, I know that I've been triggered. And so you've really got to dig into your physiology and your thoughts. Like, are you feeling tension? What's your heart rate at? Are you feeling lots of energy, especially in your major muscle groups? Like, we're going to go back to when your amygdala has been activated, what happens? And you can get tunnel vision or hyper focus on something. And oftentimes that looks like I can't stop thinking about this because I've got to say something in order to discharge this. And that's a normal response. Like when we say, what is being triggered? Like this is a big thing. Like, what does it even mean when you're triggered? I've had people say that to me and I'm like, being triggered means you are having a survival response when your survival is not directly being threatened. So it's a false activation of your amygdala. So a true activation, that doesn't mean it's not happening false. It means you are not in a life-threatening situation, but your brain is picking up that the issue is threatening your safety. So you're having a survival response when your survival is not actually being threatened. So for example, if I sit through General Conference, I'm going to have an activating thought because my brain is saying, don't fall into the trance. You don't want to be indoctrinated. That is not a trigger. That is an alarm system to keep me safe. When somebody else invites me to General Conference and I get triggered or activated, I know I'm not going, but I'm still having that warning signal that it could be potentially dangerous. So does that mean that I then go in and engage? No. Does that mean that those quote unquote false alarms are not beneficial? No, they are absolutely beneficial. It's our bodies and brains way of saying, hey, this could be dangerous, don't do it. But where we really start to talk about triggering is things like, Mason, when you used to raise your voice, which you didn't do very often, but those couple of times early on in our marriage where you raised your voice, I got super triggered because when my dad raised his voice, I was in trouble. I was going to get beat. I was going to get...
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Isolated, there was abuse going on there. So when Mason raised his voice because he was frustrated, my brain took that to mean I'm not safe. That's a trigger. So remember, a trigger is an activation of your survival instincts when you are not imminently in danger. Doesn't mean that danger isn't around the corner, because those warning signs are still there, okay? So you can have a trigger that there is absolutely no danger, or a trigger that is saying, hey, danger's around the corner. But that false activation is I'm having a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response when I am not imminently threatened. Okay? That's how I would identify that. So you've really got to dig into that physiology and identify, okay, I'm having a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. My survival brain has kicked into action. What's going on? And then you've got to soothe your physiology because, again, you are not imminently in danger. If you see this ad for General Conference, or if you're the atheist and you're suddenly in the middle of the prayer circle, your safety is like you're not going to die.
Right.
Okay? So you've got to self-soothe, which is going to be deep breathing exercises and movement. You know, we've talked about this in the past with the raid and some of these other things. And I'm going to be having a live episode shortly, like a short, where we review a lot of these foundational things for those who are coming in and they're new listeners and they haven't heard all the foundational stuff. We're going to give you some shorts here coming up, probably starting in May. Those will be coming up. So that way we can just kind of review these systems. So you're going to soothe yourself through meeting your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you need to get oxygen, you need to get food, you need to get like nutritious food, you need to move your body, you need to rest. Okay, so you've got to reach out to people that you connect with. These are things that you can do to physiologically and psychologically soothe yourself. Now, when you're triggered, probably not a good idea to go hang out with people who are also triggered about the same thing, because we get this group think phenomenon going on, which you can see this happening in these ex-Mormon spaces. You can see it happening in the TBM space. You can see it happening in all kinds of spaces, which is one person says, look how awful this is. And then you play the little telephone game and it like gets into this big, huge tornado storm where, because you've been amongst other people who are working from their amygdalas, you take something that was problematic to, oh my God, this is the next hurricane that's going to take out the entire East Coast.
Right.
That is that groupthink. We see a lot of groupthink problems in cults. It makes sense that those who are escaping religious trauma are struggling with some of those cult-like mentalities, that groupthink where we lose our critical thinking and we jump on the bandwagon of this exaggeration and turning something that's really satirical into presenting as facts. This is a normal response. Identify when you're in it.
That happens in families all the time, like in my family. You're talking about a like-minded group that chooses to talk about a topic that everyone pretty much already agrees on. So all you can do is ramp it up.
Right. Well, and that's
it's not very helpful, but
right. And what's so interesting is when we look, Mason, at the family members that have been the loudest opposition and have really engaged in the most toxic communication style, it's the family members that are next door neighbors. It's not the family member that lives 3 hours away from the one who thinks this, or both of those family members. You got two that live 3 miles away. It's not even the one that lives 15 minutes away. It's the ones that are next door neighbors, where their lives are so enmeshed that when you come up, that group think, it ends up growing their concerns or their struggles. They all feed off of each other.
Yep.
And then it grows into something, and you and I are sitting back here going, wait, what? Huh? How did you get from point A to point Z? Well, we didn't see the group think and the conversations and the buildup that then these people are walking away talking about. Absolutely. So watch out for that group think. Make sure when you're in the place of I'm physiologically soothing, I'm psychologically soothing, that you avoid environments where your triggers are going to have gasoline thrown on them. Okay. Right. You've got to come back into your rational, logical, creative problem solving brain, which means also that you can pause. You can respond when you're ready. I know that growing up, and something Mason and I talked about was, the whole saying from Bambi, if you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all. Well, there's a lot of limits there. I don't want to silence you, but I would say until you're able to say something productive and helpful, maybe refrain from contributing to the conversation. Because I want you and encourage you to advocate and address these issues, but to do so from a reality-based thinking space where you're not struggling with an acute survival response in your brain.
Right. If all you ever say is nice things, you probably won't accomplish very much either. On occasion, we have to say things that aren't nice. But again, we want to make sure that we're in the right brain space to make it a productive conversation, not just, I hate you, but you know what, I'm really struggling with the fact that you're doing this or you're doing that or right. Whatever, something that will actually help us to get where we want to be.
Right. Well, and something, that I want to make sure that I own is that on our Unpacking Mormonism Facebook page, we've got 2 clips from conference, one that demonstrates this Elder Haney's comment against another comment where we talk about all the past prophets and we show that contrast. And our little clip, our little grab to get your attention might have some satire-like things to it. And so, listener, if you are on those pages and you're like, hey, Sarah, I really feel like you are misrepresenting this, call us out on it, because we're not perfect at this. We are guilty of this. I think I've liked some of these Haney, like the people that have put together some memes. I'm like, oh yeah, I like that. That makes sense to me. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Let's go back. Let's take it in context. And I'm having to kind of back out of that and say, yeah, what he said was problematic. And so I think an appropriate response in these forums is, hey, y'all, what he said was 100% problematic, but I don't think it's as bad as it's being purported here. We've got to take this in context, and honestly, again, take a look at what you're trying not to do. And that is take things out of context, add a bunch of details and spit it out as fact. Because one of the things that we struggle with in the ex-Mormon community is we are so used to being lied to. We are super sensitive to it. Like when you identify I'm being gaslighted, you become really sensitive and you start being like, oh, you're gaslighting me. Oh, you're gaslighting me. Oh, you're gaslighting me. I actually had a conversation on Facebook with somebody. I asked a question and a whole bunch of people are like, you're gaslighting that person. I was like, well, not intentionally. I think there's a little bit of hypersensitivity. I think there's a little bit of a trauma response because all I did was say, if it makes you angry, how is it helpful to continue to engage with that content if you're always angry? My point was not to silence their participation, their engagement, or their voice, but just to understand. But two people were like, you're gaslighting. It's okay to be angry. I'm like, I know. I like anger. I was just trying to understand and couldn't get through that. And so it's also normal for us to create what we fear.
Yeah.
And that is, I don't want to be gaslit. So in order to protect myself from being gaslit, I'm going to gaslight back. And that's a huge problem. So the best way to do that is to be the cycle breaker. You've got to identify when you're doing it, when you've engaged in it, redirect yourself once you're in that calmer brain space. I mean, you're going to go out there, you're going to fuck it up. That's normal. Okay, people, it happens. We're all human. I do it. Mason, you do it. I swear you do it. He's laughing at me. That was a joke. You do it, but I do it too. Everybody does it. So when you recognize it, soothe yourself, get back into your frontal cortex, redirect, own when you've messed it up, shift your statements, those types of things so that you can begin to respond in a place where you are acting in a manner that you feel is authentically you.
Yeah.
Mace, did you have anything else to add today in closing?
I don't think so about this topic. There's one thing I want to add about a previous topic, but not this topic. So, I listened to the episode that you did by yourself, and
I am not broken episode.
I'm not broken, and you
Okay.
talked about the communication between me and our bishop here about Katie going to church. And the one thing that I want to clarify is that he did not get all the information that you thought he did. I didn't know that one of the reasons Katie doesn't want to go to Sunday school is because there's boys there or a leader there without a female leader. I don't know any of those details, and neither did the bishop. So he didn't deny her request to be in the primary because knowing all of those things.
Right.
He just denied it because he didn't think it was best. And I just want to clarify that sometimes we think people have a good understanding of a situation and then make a bad choice or a choice we don't like. In this case, he did not have all of that understanding and made a choice that we weren't very happy with. But I think it's important to just recognize that he didn't have that information.
Right, he didn't purposefully say you have to go here because that's what you have to do despite the trials and the challenges that you have.
He's not trying to do an inappropriate exposure therapy here. He didn't know about those concerns for Katie. He just made a decision that he thought was best.
I appreciate that clarification because our current bishop that is, for Mason, for the ward that you attend, has done a really good job, I think, of managing the nuanced place that you are. I don't feel he's engaged in shaming you. He's a good man with good intentions and solid boundaries. Like he's not crossing those boundaries. I think the thing that really bothered me is instead of trusting the parents on what is best for our child, he made a decision without inquiry, but also I shouldn't have to explain why on something like that, in my opinion. But thank you absolutely for that clarification. I'm glad because I know we do have local listeners, and I definitely do not want people to think poorly of this man who I feel has handled my exit from the church and Mason, a lot of your questions beautifully. Honestly, we couldn't ask for somebody to do it any better. He's doing a very good job. And he's, one of the things I hear a lot in the ex-Mormon space is nobody's checked in on us after we've left. And that's also not the case. This bishop has actively checked in and made sure that we're okay and offered to be there in a very appropriate boundary space. And I've been very appreciative of that, Bishop.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that one point so that we get a clearer look at things. So, but that's it.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you.
I love the context today. I love what we talked about.
Yeah, and maybe what we should do is have Alex take that little clip where you said that and tag that on to the end of that episode. So that way, those who listen to it in the future have that, hey, Mason's here now. This was his feedback on that episode that I did by myself. So that way they get
then. I think that would be great.
What is that like in the newspaper? You get like that little edit,
your
the correction.
your
redactions. Let's make sure that goes in there. I love it.
Okay.
So thank you so much, listeners. We've got a lot of things coming to you. In fact, we have talked about starting in May. I believe our date is going to be May 11th. We are going to be doing a Thursday lunch break like show with Sarah. It'll be short. It'll be live. And it's going to be to review some of the things that we've talked about on the podcast before. It'll be super short to give those of you who do not have 90 minutes to dedicate to every episode an opportunity to check in and also engage. So if you are interested in that, start looking forward to those episodes. Again, the plan is to launch those on May 11th. And they will be, I believe we're planning on starting around 12:15 Central Time on Thursdays. And that'll be an opportunity. If you've got questions or something, go ahead, email me those questions. I will respond to those on here. If you've got a question about an episode or something, I will be here to answer those questions. Mason will join us on the days that he is available. It probably won't be very often just because of his schedule at work. And again, it'll be just a really quick lunch break show. Grab a coffee, grab your lunch, and tune in live on Thursdays starting May 11th of 2023.
The intent to kind of hit some of the mental health things that you've addressed that can really change the way that we view things. It just in kind of a quick way, almost like the RAID worksheet, right? Like here it is. These are the particulars. Now go and do.
Right. It'll also be where I respond to, because we're starting to get a lot of emails with questions and how would you do this? And so I'm going to start addressing a lot of those questions during that live show. So that way everybody can benefit, because I know that when I've got one person that asks me a question, there's probably 100 people with a similar question that didn't speak it out. It'll be a great opportunity for you to engage with me. And those shows will last anywhere from maybe 15 to 30 minutes before I've got to end my lunch break and hop back over to clinic on Thursday. So we're really looking forward to that. Again, that starts May 11th. And as always, we would love to see you if you've got a question or something. Our Facebook page, Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. If you want an invite to the private group, shoot me a private message through that. My name is Sarah Westbrook on
Facebook.
So on Facebook.
Yep.
So absolutely do that. Our moderators will, tag me and make sure that I see those things. Or also visit our website at daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com or email us at daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com. Thanks so much. Talk to you next time. Today's episode was hosted by Sarah and Mason Westbrook, produced by Daisy Girl Communications and Alex Vidalis. We would love to see you on our Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma Facebook page. Today's music provided by Run to Life and John Worthy Music. If you made it through the opening prelude music today, you might know that we are, or have put together, deduced that we're going to be talking about what to do when religious shit triggers you.
That would never happen.
Never?
Never.
That was a really long pause, Mason. Like there was like an awkward, almost like, is Mason gonna pick up my jokes? Are you like, am I funny today?
Chicken tacos should only be trusted to chicken professionals.
That's where we come in. Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One comes with pico de gallo and creamy chipotle ranch. And the other comes with bacon, lettuce, tomato, and avocado ranch. Chicken experts since 1990. Chicken taco experts since now. Order yours today in the Zax Rewards app. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.